There's a saying that wherever you are in the world, you'll always bump into a Pinoy. This is true, especially when there are 2.2 million overseas Filipino workers with contracts processed by the Philippine Overseas Employment Agency, or POEA. According to the POEA reports for 2013, Saudi Arabia is the country of choice for many OFWs. In fact, more than 380,000 Filipinos are working and living there. The other top 10 countries include countries in the Middle East, such as the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Part of Asia like Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Taiwan, and Italy. However, these are just OFWs who have legal documents with the POEA and Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA. There are thousands more without legal documents and thousands more that are victims of illegal recruitment. In 2012, according to the POEA records, 152 cases of illegal recruitment, including 312 victims, were filed. Despite the efforts of the government in stopping these practices, there are still those who do this as a means of profit from the needs and hopes of others. What then is the government doing to further prevent acts of illegal recruitment? How can people detect if the agencies they're working with are not legit? And for those who are already deployed, how can they be protected by the government in the countries they're currently in?
Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will discuss your legal rights as an overseas Filipino worker, what you need to know if you're planning to apply work abroad, and what you need to do should you encounter problems commonly associated with OFWs, such as illegal recruitment and the like.
Our guest for tonight is Attorney Hans Cacdac, POEA Administrator. Good evening,
Good evening.
Attorney
Good
Hans.
evening.
Karen. Good evening, Rod, and also to your viewers. Good evening.
Good evening, Administrator Hans. I would normally call him just Hans because we're old friends. We grew up together.
Siguro para hindi
Yeah.
mahaba, let's call him Hans.
Yes,
Yes,
Hans
of
na lang,
course,
Hans,
of
yes.
course. Thank
Okay,
you.
so
So I think everyone already knows what an OFW is.
yeah.
So
But maybe just
perhaps
quickly
Hans-
to define
Oo.
one. No? Kasi there are people who go abroad and might work and may not be considered
Yeah,
OFW.
are they considered OFW? So what are the requirements in order to become a truly eligible OFW or overseas Filipino worker?
Okay, an OFW is one who seeks work abroad, gets remuneration, gets paid for the work abroad. It's also important to make a distinction between a temporary worker, Filipino, who goes abroad for temporary purposes, and one who settles abroad permanently.
Okay.
So one who is just a temporary worker or temporary contract worker would be under the POEA, that kind of an OFW. Okay. So the requirements are fairly simple. One has to go through a licensed recruitment agency, and that licensed recruitment agency in the Philippines has to have a registered or accredited foreign employer, also registered with the POEA. And upon registering that foreign employer, the recruitment takes place, and once a worker has been qualified or selected, then that worker has to be processed or documented through the POEA, and the end result is what we call an OEC, on Overseas Employment Certificate or Clearance.
Okay.
So the POEA basically is the agency that you really have to go through in order to qualify for work abroad. What about those that deal directly with some recruitment agencies? Can you give our viewers tips on making sure that they are dealing with a legal recruitment
Parang
agency?
direct, I guess,
Oo. So
a
I guess what
recruitment
acts
agency
are
from
considered
abroad
as
would
Yes,
call you directly, and
Yeah, or a unlicensed recruitment
unlicensed,
agency
yeah.
or recruiter here. There are many telltale signs of illegal recruitment, as we call it. If you recruit without a license or deal directly with an employer without going through a Philippine recruitment agency, there are telltale signs. The most basic of which is that, well, aside from a recruitment agency being licensed with a prominent display of the license number, under POA rules, recruitment should happen in the office of the licensed recruiter. So the most basic telltale sign is the kind of recruitment that happens outside of an office. Let's say the most common of which would be house-to-house recruitment. In the provinces and in far-flung areas, fifth, sixth class municipalities, recruiters would have illegal recruiters would have sub agents who will be among the barangay folk or city folk, town folk, and would roam and would knock on the doors of people and visit and chat with them and unbeknownst to the family, recruit illegally a family member.
So Hans, the fact that someone goes to you personally, that's really not allowed. So if you were approached, should you insist that you do it in their office?
Yes, in their office. Of course, there's an exception to the rule that it happens in the office, and that is if there is recruitment that is authorized by the POEA through a special recruitment authority. But still, a recruitment that happens, say, in a mall or in a hotel, jobs fair, will still have to have the sanction of the POEA. But yes, the short answer is if one approaches you outside of an office environment, then that would be an indication of illegal recruitment.
No, Hans, there are a lot of would-be employees who would like to work abroad, and I think some of them are maybe discouraged by the whole bureaucracy, kasi the many requirements, so to speak. Is it as easy as you said? You said there were simple requirements, but in a nutshell, how long will it take for a person to, from being someone who would like to work abroad and until he gets documented to go abroad?
Yeah. Well, as far as the POA is concerned, starting from getting a license, it would usually take no more than 30 days to get a license. That includes the panel interview, face-to-face interview with POEA personnel. That would include, of course, the submission of the documents and the verification, evaluation of the documents. 30 days as long as the documentation is complete.
And basically, what are those documents? I mean,
in
I
a
know there are
license application, usually there's a capitalization requirement. So a 2 million peso capitalization
Oh, but this is for the
requirement.
recruiter.
For the recruiter, yes. And then the escrow deposit of 1 million pesos for future money claims. And such other documents such as a recruitment agreement between the licensed recruiter and the foreign employer.
So this is for 30 days. Is really for,
30 days
the processing
for the licensing.
of the license
Yes.
for the recruiter.
Yes.
But what about the OFW?
Okay.
If you're the one applying?
Okay. Let me also briefly talk about the accreditation of the employer, because this is a common concern raised with us. That part of the process of hiring a Filipino worker will include the basic step of accrediting a foreign employer. So it takes only about 5 working days to accredit or register a foreign employer. And then moving on, as I said, once the employer is accredited or registered with us, the recruitment process commences. So a worker will apply with that recruitment agency in relation to the job opening of the foreign employer. There will be a qualification, medical examination, procedure, acquiring of clearances, NBI, etc. Now, once that person is hired, then it is back to submission of the documents to the POEA. So with the POEA, it won't last more than a week if the documents are complete. One will secure an overseas employment clearance within a week, a span of 1 week. We are an ISO certified establishment. So our processes are enrolled under the ISO.
So it's basically less than a month for
less than a month,
OFW.
but I must say that there is a variable period in the middle, because that is the period when the worker approaches the recruiter, and the recruiter now will process, qualify, interview, determine whether one is qualified.
Part.
Okay.
That's the private sector part of the process. So what I have just mentioned, the 30-day licensing period, the 1-week accreditation period, and the 1-week OFW documentation period, these are the steps that are taken by us, that are brought before us.
Now, Hans, what about expenses? Is it expensive for a person to apply as a qualified OFW?
Well, basically, the rule is if it it would be an expense that you would spend for anyway. Then it would be on account of the worker. Example, passport. A Filipino citizen at some point or another may be required or may want to avail of a passport or have a passport. So the passport would be on the account of the worker. So with an NBI clearance and a medical examination. So these are the three main expenses that would be on account of the worker. All others under POEA rules and regulations should not be on account of the worker. Example would be visa fees or any kind of fees in relation to the recruitment of the worker. Now, the big question is on placement fees or recruitment fees. Placement fees, by definition, would pertain to the fees that will cover the services of the recruiter.
Agent,
okay. So it could be called in so many ways: recruitment fees, processing fees, etc. The rule is, in general, a recruiter may charge a 1-month placement fee that is pegged on 1 month's salary. So 1 month's salary worth of placement fees. But there are qualifications to this rule, conditions. One is that it should be covered by a duly authorized receipt payment. Should be covered by a BIR authorized receipt. That should stipulate the purpose of the payment and obviously the amount. And there are also exceptions to the rule. The kinds of categories, classes of workers who should not be paying placement fees, such as seafarers, domestic workers, should not be charged placement fees at all.
But how does the recruitment agency make money out of these
the recruitment agency will have to charge the employer.
An employer.
It's commonly called service fees. That is not part of the area of regulation so far as the POEA is concerned. But the recruiter would have to gain profit from the employer with respect to seafarers, domestic workers, or over and above the 1 month salary cap. Also, there are some countries that prohibit the charging of placement fees. The UK, Ireland, the Netherlands, recently New Zealand. We issued a circular on New Zealand, and the US insofar as H-2B or lower skilled workers are concerned. And lastly, about placement fees, these should be charged only when employment has been secured or obtained by the worker. So not upfront.
A lot of people normally say that they are required to pay an advance. But that's something that we can clarify after the break. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. You're still watching Legal Help Desk with our guest, Attorney Hans Cacdac from the POEA. Attorney Hans, before the break, we were asking if you mentioned placement fees and you are asked to pay in advance. For instance, the recruiter says, for this job, you will be having a monthly salary of 100,000 pesos. So they ask, can you be asked to pay for that 100,000 pesos right away?
The answer is no. In fact, that is one of the indicators of illegal recruitment, if somebody asks money from you upfront. Because POEA rules say that placement fees can only be charged once employment has been obtained. And the best indicator of this, if there is a contract. So once the contract has been signed, then that is the time when placement fees can be charged.
So just to clarify, it can be before you're paid your salary, but as long as the contract is already there. So
That's
even
right.
before you start working, it might be possible that you will be required to pay the amount of your salary.
That's right. And it may even be possible to have part of your salary be deducted on site. But the presumption there is that the payment is legal. The charge and the payment.
Okay. All right. Now, There are a couple of questions from our viewers, no, and from social media, and some of them were asking in relation to the time when kunyari, there's already a contract in place and there's a breach, for example. Let's say they're not getting what they were promised, or it's not in accordance with the contract, and so they're always asking for remedies. You know, like for example, I already got my contract, I'm already abroad, but my employer is doing this, or what was promised to me is not being given. What are their usual courses of remedy with your office or any other office in government?
Yes, if they are still here in the country prior to departure, if they suspect any illegal act by their recruiter, for instance, a contract switching substitution situation, then of course they may go to our offices at the POEA. We have a legal assistance division and desk that will provide a lawyer to advise the worker. If on site, then there is the Philippine Overseas Labor Office that is run by the Labor Attaché.
Meaning this is abroad. You can
Abroad.
look for that.
Abroad, it would be in the embassies or in the Philippine consulates abroad. They could go there. Usually there are websites of these embassies and consulates, so they can secure the contact info. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and Twitter as well. So we can also be reached through those means of communication, and then we could start processing the issue or
So you're
the
saying
case.
if I'm an OFW and I can tweet you directly,
Yes, of course.
and you would respond to it?
I
Is
am
that-
on Twitter and Facebook and reply directly to
Wow.
those who...
What about those employees wherein as soon as they start working, the employer gets their passport and keeps it? How do you deal with employers like that if you were already abroad by then?
Well, if the complaint is brought before us, then we call for the Philippine recruiter here and we ask why. Because under Philippine passport law, that should not be the
You
case.
should always have your passport.
So we ask the recruiter to communicate, coordinate with the foreign employer and return the passport of the Philippine worker.
Okay. Now, apart from the legal repercussions of being required to go through POEA, why is it, Hans, important for an employee to be registered or should go through POEA registered recruiters? Why is it so important? Is it for protection? Is it for monitoring them?
Yes, both protection and monitoring. Essentially, our laws and regulations are built toward protection and ensuring that Filipinos who seek work abroad obtain decent work and work that will not bring them into abusive, exploitative conditions. The scourge of human trafficking, as you know, is a worldwide threat. And so when one departs from the Philippines, the question is simple. Is that worker a legitimate worker or a worker who has been processed accordingly in accordance with Philippine law? So that is the question that immigration will ask a Filipino worker who intends to work abroad. And that is the whole point of processing with the POEA, to make sure that legitimate workers, OFWs, are documented and that the proof of documented status will be available, will be presented at the point of exit departure.
Hans, now I'd like to ask you about certain acts that may be considered as illegal on the part of an OFW or a person seeking to work abroad, because some people, sometimes they leave with a tourist visa because they're promised that we'll just process your papers once you get here. So perhaps you can give us a list of some common acts that a lot of people might not be aware of, would be already considered illegal in terms of working abroad.
Yes, I've already mentioned one, which is house-to-house recruitment or recruitment outside of the office of a recruiter. Another common illegal practice would be in the area of charging fees, and we've taken that up already, charging of fees outright. A third common practice these days would be that which is done through emailing or through internet recruitment. So when you receive an email communication or internet communication offering a certain line of work, then that would most likely be illegal because Philippine recruiters, as I said, have a specific means to recruit, mainly through job advertisements, mainly through announcements in their websites with respect to available jobs, other job portals also on the internet. But so direct email communication is not a common means of recruiting, and therefore that should be doubted as well. When one is recruited by an individual, one could easily check with the POEA whether that particular individual is licensed to recruit, because at the POEA, we have a list of all employees and officials of each licensed recruitment agency. So it's easy to check. Most often...
is that in the website also? Is it updated?
Or you have to go to the office?
Or you have to go to the
In the
office.
website, we have a list of recruitment agencies, so you can type the name and you could check. We have a smartphone application that is available for free, a Google Play, App Store, etc., where one could also check the validity of a particular license or recruitment agency. So it's easy these days to find out. Of course, checking with our office.
And even
also,
outside of Metro Manila, in the different
outside
provinces,
of Metro
you
Manila,
have
we
regional
have
offices.
an office in every major Philippine city.
Okay.
We have hotlines also. It's in the website, but I can mention them now: 722-1144, 722-1155, where one could also ask.
Now,
But what about
sige.
on the part of the actual person wanting to work abroad? There are some who, for instance, they start with a tourist visa, that's what they apply for, and then once they get there, that's when they start working.
Or, yeah,
Okay.
applying,
Or
yeah.
will you be considered illegal, an illegal
Or did they
worker?
violate- or
Yeah,
what are the
or are
penalties,
you going to be
Yes.
subject to penalties
Yes.
in the Philippines?
They are undocumented in the eyes of Philippine law. And what I can say about visit visa hiring is this: usually workers who get hired through visit visa arrangements, obviously not legal from Philippine laws, place themselves in an abusive and exploitative situation, because usually, let's say in the UAE, you have 30 to 60 days upon arrival to use up that visit visa. And so if you plan to work on a visit visa, you are placing yourselves in a situation where within 30 to 60 days you have to find a job. And within 30 to 60 days, you will be offered work that you may not find acceptable in an ordinary situation, but you would accept because you were under a 30, 60-day timetable.
So you're
So,
basically trying to catch the time before you go.
In Tagalog, kapit sa patalim, di ba? So if you are placed in that situation, the likelihood of accepting a substandard work arrangement is greater. And so we always advise people not to go through the visit visa arrangement, because it will lead to abusive or exploitative
But will they be
situation.
penalized for not going through, let's say, licensed recruiters, or there's no penalty?
The
naman?
workers
It's just
themselves,
parang-
no, but those who had arranged for that, those who had recruited the person, especially if they're within Philippine jurisdiction,
Could face
will be held
sanctions.
liable.
So even those that are accidentally hired, meaning they didn't have an intention to apply for work, they're just on vacation, they got a job offer, your advice would be come back to the Philippines
back to
for
the Philippines,
get
yes.
all
Go
the
through the
necessary
process.
documents and then leave with a work visa.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. We have some questions, Hans, from our viewers. One is from Jomar. I was one of the OFW repatriated from Libya. I was not paid our last month's salary, and due to the ongoing conflict, I have not finished my contract. I have no more communications with our employer in Libya from the time we were abandoned on site. Can we claim from our recruiter in the Philippines just compensation?
The answer is yes, because Philippine recruiters have joint and several liability with their foreign employers. Just about 3 days ago, we had a meeting with DFA and the Libya returnees. And I heard the DFA say that they are willing foreign in behalf of the workers here to communicate with their employers in Libya still for any concerns such as non-payment of wages. Most of them have issues about end of service pay, which is allowed under Libyan law because most of them are 50, 60 plus years old. So the DFA has offered this service. So we would gladly receive Sheila so that we could process her complaint. First with the recruiter, and then second to ask the DFA to step in and coordinate.
Okay. That's good news for our
that's
viewers.
great. Fantastic.
Another question from Sheila. I applied as a waitress abroad through a recruitment agency. I was already hired by one company and was supposedly set for deployment in 2 months' time. 2 months have passed and I still didn't receive my ticket or documents from the agency. I called the agency but no one was answering. When I went to their office, I found out that their agency closed and didn't give any notifications if they moved or not. I already gave them my placement fee amounting to 75,000 pesos. Will I still be able to get it back?
Okay.
The answer is yes, because failure to deploy is one of the prohibited acts under POEA rules and regulations. So I suggest that we could process the complaint of Sheila, so that a proper complaint could be filed against the recruiter, even if it has closed. And then there is an escrow account, as I had mentioned, that could be accessed even if the agency had
when they
already-
file
And
a
this
complaint-
is assuming that this agency is licensed.
Assuming
But
it is licensed?
If
Licensed,
the
yeah.
agency is not licensed,
If it
then
is-
mas mahirap. It's
If it is
harder to
not,
get
we
the
would
money
have
back.
to dig deeper and find out, do some case building, bring in law enforcement, PNP or NBI to investigate.
Okay. So now, however, in this case, can she can she file when she files a case in the POEA? Does she need a lawyer, for example, or does she just need to fill up a form, or what?
Yes,
what is the process?
there will be a form, of course, to fill out in terms of the complaint, but no lawyer
No lawyer is
needed.
needed.
We could provide legal assistance in the course of the case if she would prefer a lawyer of her own and not just the legal assistance that we provide. We could access legal aid and also some volunteer lawyers in this regard to provide her
Okay.
one.
And lastly, Attorney Hans, earlier we talked about fees and you said there are some that are for the account of the workers, like the medical examination,
exam,
NBI clearance,
NBI.
passports. Ballpark figure, how much would that cost?
Okay, that would be around in the neighborhood, not much, probably less than 1,000, I think.
Less than 1,000 pesos.
Passport, okay, NBI and passport would be less than 1,000. I just can't recall how much the passport fees are, but medical exam ballpark figure would be around, let's say, 1,500 to 2,000.
Okay,
Okay.
so
For the
definitely-
basic.
Okay,
Yeah.
so not too costly.
Not
That's
too
good
much,
news for our
yes, yes.
viewers.
And just quickly, we want to emphasize also the I guess the punishment, no, that is meted to mga illegal recruiters. Ballpark, what are the penalties for those who may want to take advantage of mga
For illegal
employees?
recruiters.
The penalties had been raised, in fact, for simple illegal recruitment, which is less than 3 victims or less than 3 perpetrators. That would be 6 to 12 years imprisonment.
Wow.
And for what they call large-scale illegal recruitment, more than 3 victims or perpetrators, it would be life. I'm sorry, the penalty for simple has been raised from 6 to 12 to 12 to 20.
So 12 to 20 years.
So it's really
of
12 to
imprisonment
20.
na.
And then for large scale,
Large
it's
scale.
life.
Lifetime
imprisonment.
imprisonment.
It is a
Very
serious,
harsh.
serious offense, no?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying
Thank you.
that. And thank you again for helping us answer our viewer questions. Attorney Hans Cacdac, POEA Administrator. Legal Help Desk will be back after this short break.
One of the most common problems associated with being an overseas Filipino worker is illegal recruitment. Illegal recruitment is defined as any act of canvassing, contracting, hiring, or promising employment abroad by a non-licensed agency. To hopefully lessen incidences such as these, the POEA has released helpful tips for OFWs to avoid becoming a victim of illegal recruitment, and these include: do not apply at recruitment agencies not licensed by the POEA. Do not deal with licensed agencies without job orders. Do not deal with any person who is not an authorized representative of a licensed agency. Do not transact business outside the registered address of the agency. Do not pay more than the allowed placement fee. It should be equivalent to 1 month's salary, exclusive of documentation and processing costs. Do not pay any placement fee. Do not deal with training centers and travel agencies which promise overseas employment. Do not accept a tourist visa. And lastly, do not deal with fixers. POEA launched a mobile app last year. The app can be used to verify a recruitment agency status with the POEA and to check available job orders from recruitment agencies. So the next time you're thinking of applying for work abroad, keep these helpful tips in mind, and always remember to go through the legal process of applying so as not to become a victim of illegal recruitment and the like.
You're still tuned in to Legal Help Desk, and we are now joined by Attorney Rufer Tolentino, partner at the Tolentino and Bautista Law Office. Good evening, and thank you for joining us, Attorney Rufer.
Good evening, Karen. Good evening, Rod. Thanks for having me here tonight.
So you
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
specialize on compensation
And benefits,
And benefits
of
for-
OFWs.
OFWs.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we just had Attorney Hans Cacdac, no, the POEA administrator, talking about illegal recruitment and also mga requirements of agencies, no, recruitment agencies, so that they can be accredited, and tips on sa mga OFWs, so where to go. Now let's talk about specifically mga benefits and compensation of OFWs.
And I think at this point, let's clarify first to everyone out there that when you're talking about OFW, it's basically anyone, any Filipino working abroad. So you can even be a lawyer, a doctor, accountant, senior manager, but you're still an OFW.
That's right. That's right,
So,
Karen.
ano yung mga benefits?
Well, the benefits, the usual benefits actually, we have this, the SSS, the OWA benefits, the Pag-ibig benefits.
What are the OWA benefits
yes.
specifically?
OWA
Yeah,
specifically.
the OWA benefits is, of course, first is the assistance that the government can
Will
render
provide.
to the OFW, especially those who are having problems abroad, and also those who encountered accidents and injuries while working. They have that. They can avail of benefits. And speaking of benefits in case of injuries and disabilities,
In the course of work.
yeah, in the course of work, we have a relatively new law. This is the amendment of the Migrant Workers Act, RA 10022, which requires compulsory insurance for every OFW that a recruitment agency or a manning agency is going to deploy abroad.
I
Who
see.
pays for
Yeah.
the premiums of this insurance coverage?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question. The law is very clear and specific that the payment for the premium should come from the manning agency or the recruitment agency.
I see.
No,
So part of
yes.
the cost
So
in a way.
dapat
kasi-
it's
Yeah, part of
not
the
the worker that shells out.
Yes, yeah, and there is actually a penalty if there is substantial evidence that
You're passing it on.
Yeah, passing it on to the OFW.
Okay. So right now the rule is still they can only charge as much as 1 month's salary, and they can't charge additional fees. Is that correct?
Right, that's right.
So the insurance is taken up by the
yes,
by the
yeah,
manning agency.
that's part of the expense of the recruitment agency or the manning agency.
All right.
Attorney
go
Rufer,
ahead.
you also mentioned the benefits, for instance, if you get into an injury or if you get sick abroad while working. If it's a high-level employment, for instance, you're working for a multinational company abroad as an accountant, usually they have also some medical and insurance benefits for employees, the company that you're working for. So the ones that are provided for by law, from SSS, for instance, Pag-ibig, is that on top of whatever you might get, or will having a lot of benefits for the company you're working for disqualify you?
Whatever benefit that your contract with the company, if it stipulates there that in case of accidents or injuries or illness, for that matter, you get compensation for this and for that, that does not erase your entitlement to the basic benefits under the Philippine law.
I see. Okay. Now, you earlier mentioned that OFWs are also entitled to SSS, Pag-ibig, is that correct?
Right.
And PhilHealth, are they covered by PhilHealth?
Yeah, PhilHealth, they're
well?
also covered.
Now, how can you implement that, considering that their employers are abroad and the employers are, basically can't remit to SSS? Or are you going to require their employers to be remitting contributions to SSS and PhilHealth and Pag-ibig?
Yes, yeah. Because most of the OFWs have their recruitment agencies.
Correct.
Or manning agencies for seafarers. Their remittances are coursed through the recruitment agency or the manning agency. And that is where the deductions get into. And
Remittances, meaning remittances back home?
remittances back home.
Oh, okay.
Because they are required to remit for their families.
Yes.
And these are one of the deductions.
And it's the manning agency who will then pay on behalf of the employees?
Yeah, actually, it's the employee who's paying, but they are the ones deducting because they're the ones paying it to the...
Correct. It's the manning agencies who will be responsible to be paying.
Yeah, they're just sort of like an agent of
Conduit,
the employee in the payment of these premiums and monthly contributions.
How about contractual problems that they have? No? Are there certain benefits that OFWs have when it comes to contractual problems that they have with their employer?
Well, of course,
Let's say they agreed on a particular job description and it's not happening, or they're not being paid their salaries. What kind of benefits can they avail of under the law in addressing this?
If there are violations in the contracts, now the employee, well, of course, he can avail of the legal measures, and these are available, of course, when he's abroad, and he can go to the Philippine Labor Office. But if he's already in the Philippines, he can file a case against the recruitment agency and the principal, and he can go to the NLRC, that's the National Labor Relations Commission, for, of course, the redress of his grievances.
Does he have to hire a lawyer, or does the OWA provide legal services?
Not necessarily at first. If you can actually file with the NLRC by yourself, but of course, if it's quite a complicated matter, then of course I do recommend.
And would you recommend someone from there or a lawyer from the Philippines?
Well, of course, a lawyer from the Philippines would be better because, the parties that we are suing are Filipino companies. That's precisely the reason why the Philippines is really encouraging the employment of overseas Filipinos through recruitment agencies. Because if you're gonna sue your principal, that's going to be abroad, and that's very hard for a Filipino.
And if you have a local recruitment agency, at least you can get your claim.
Yes, they will take care of that, and they will answer all your problems.
Okay.
All right. Okay, we have some questions, Attorney Rufer, from our viewers. Ibarra sent this question. I am an OFW, and I would like to ask about the OWA assistance for those like me who got into an accident while working. I was told by OWA that since I was not permanently disabled, I would not get any assistance. Can you please enlighten me if this is true or not?
Well, first we have to distinguish between the permanent and disability and partial disability. And another one, there is this temporary disability and temporary and permanent disability.
Right.
If you have a partial disability, which means it is not a total disability, like for example, if you lost one of your hands, well, of course, you are entitled to that. It is not true that if you are not permanently and totally disabled, you are not entitled to benefits from the OWA.
But
of course, yes.
When is it? But according to him, he wasn't able to claim because it's not a permanent disability. Are there partial disabilities where he cannot claim?
Partial disabilities are also compensable.
Compensable.
under the OWA.
Okay.
Of course, all you need to do is present to the OWA a medical certificate certifying your partial disability. And they have their own doctor also there who will check on you and then find out if you indeed have a partial disability.
So basically, to answer our viewer's question, it's not true that you cannot claim if it's a partial disability. You still can. You can claim your benefits from the OWWA or OWA. Okay, we have another question from Myla. My uncle was in a horrible accident while driving his company's truck in Kuwait. He became paralyzed from the neck down. He doesn't have a wife or children. Who can claim his benefits from the POEA? Can his fiancée be a beneficiary since she is the one taking care of him? How sad, no?
Yeah.
I think this is
Horrible.
permanent disability.
Yeah, permanent disability. Well, I really commiserate with the plight of that OFW. But unfortunately, the law requires that
Married.
it is either the spouse, or if he's single, the parents, or if the spouse is not around, no longer there, the children. Of course.
What about nephews and nieces? Pwede pa rin. Kung wala.
Law of succession.
Okay.
So
Yes.
the closest one, the closest relative, then eliminates all the other
That's
relatives.
right. That's right.
Okay. Okay. All right. So
And we have better benefits, of course, when we talk of seafarers. The seafarers have better benefits. This is in terms of dollar, but they have to, of course, follow the requirements of the law. If you have an accident, of course, you need to have an accident report from the vessel. And if you have an illness, you need also a medical
and where did they
report.
claim? Did they claim in the OWA? Did they claim with the manning agency?
Well, the good thing about seafarers is that they are being insured by a multinational insurance company. In maritime parlance, they call this PNI clubs. These PNI clubs are covering the vessels. So whoever are the crew in the vessels, when they encounter accidents or they have illnesses, this will take care of the insurance claims. But of course, there's a requirement that when you get to the Philippines, after you are being repatriated, you have to report within 3 days.
Within
from the
3
time.
days.
3
That's
days.
so
Yeah,
soon.
that's
Okay.
72 hours. And also there are requirements that you have to attend every schedule of your examinations. Because these benefits are quite substantial in terms of compared to the land base. To the land base, yeah. The reason there is seafarers are exposed to quite a higher risk
Yes.
compared to the land-based OFWs.
And they're usually also away from their homes longer.
Right.
Okay.
So they're entitled to better benefits.
And in the case kanina of our viewer question from Myla, since the fiancé is not related to the person who got into an accident, the advice would be just file the claim with the POEA through the parents, any of the siblings, or a relative, closest relative, in that order. And then you can have, siguro on a practical matter, an arrangement with the fiancé na they can remit the money na lang since she's the one taking care of it.
Right. Maybe for compassionate reason, maybe they can give at least a little to her.
Yeah. Thank you, Attorney Rufer. Very helpful
Yes.
inputs.
Thank you,
and,
Karen. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Rufer.
And I'm sure that type of information really helped all those who not only are working, but those who plan to work abroad.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll take another short break. Legal Help Desk will return, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Legal Help Desk. And today we had an interesting topic, overseas foreign workers.
No,
And-
OFWs,
Yes.
our heroes.
And I hope we were able to clarify that when you're talking about OFW, it applies to all types of employment as long as you're a Filipino working abroad. So
Yeah.
normally kasi merong conception na this is just applicable if you're
Yes.
working in construction or
Right.
as a seaman, but actually it applies to all types of jobs. So even high-level jobs like being a doctor in a hospital abroad, or even being a lawyer in a law firm
In
abroad.
fact,
or
applied to me. No?
accountant.
I got expatriated in 2008 and up to 2010, and I actually asked Attorney Hans, should I have myself registered? And he said at the time, even if you're an expat, it's always important to have yourself registered as an OFW. Para the OWA, the Overseas Welfare, Workers Welfare, will be able to help you in case may issue na, may problem, or let's say nagka-accident ka and all that, and knock on wood, if something happens to you, the repatriation of your body, mga ganun, no? It's very important that you're registered. If you're not registered, then they don't have a record. Technically, they can't help you.
Yes.
You know? So,
And as earlier discussed with Attorney Hans from the POEA, when you're talking about illegal recruitment, it's not just violations by those recruiters that don't have licenses. Actually, there can be illegal recruitment even when you're talking about a licensed recruiter, because if they commit violations, then they can be considered an illegal recruiter. But it's very important in the first place to find out if they are licensed with the POEA, so that you won't have problems when you file claims against them. And now there's a very easy way to do that. There's already a phone app or phone application available that is POEA run, and you can check recruiters using this app, whether they're licensed, and then you can also look at available, I think, job postings.
job postings, and you can check who are the accredited illegal recruiters. And also, for example, in the provinces, you have to make sure that the recruitment is being done in their office. Don't
bawal yung door to
bawal
door.
yung door to door, no? So it's important. And also, want to point out that the recruitment agency can only charge the equivalent of 1 month's salary. That's it. That's the fee that they can charge. No? If
Yes.
there's anything beyond that, it's kind of alarm bell. So you might want to talk to the POEA, and the POEA has mga legal and administrative officers over there, and you can always ask. No, it's always safe to go to POEA and confirm whether you can avail or you can really work with this particular recruiter. Kasi it's better be safe than sorry.
And speaking about that advance on a month's salary, you can only be required to pay that if the employment has been secured. So yung mga ibang recruiters that normally operate by saying, you pay us this amount, which is equivalent to the salary that we are aiming for, you cannot be compelled to do that. bawal yung mga advances na yan. So, you can only be required to pay as long as the employment has already been secured.
Okay, and now the recent law nga in 2010, you are now, there's compulsory insurance now for mga OFWs. Okay, so apart from your benefits, SSS, PhilHealth, Pag-ibig, which are required by your manning agency to remit that for you, you also have compulsory insurance. So there are more benefits now for mga OFWs. All right. Over the week, we have received some questions and comments from our viewers on topics that we have previously discussed. Our first recap question is from Carlo. An airline damaged my check-in luggage and it's beyond repair. 3 weeks has passed and it is still under investigation. What are their liabilities? Okay, so normally pag it comes to damaged luggage, it's based on the International Convention.
Yes.
No, for international
Actually,
flights.
there's what you call the Warsaw Convention. And under the Warsaw Convention, and also what you call the Hague Agreement, then there's the airline should be liable, and you should have filed your claim for the damaged luggage within 7 days. But in terms of their liability, they are liable. What they have to do is compensate you for the damage that is equivalent to the amount of damages you sustained for your baggage. There is a limit. The prescribed limit is it should not exceed around $1,500 unless you complied with the requirement of the airline to declare any higher potential damage because of the value. If there's higher value to your baggage, then you should have also declared it. But generally, you can really claim for any damages to your baggage.
Of course, that's for international flights. For domestic flights, normally the maximum is half of what the convention provides. So you have to bear that in mind, whether it's a domestic flight or international flight. All right.
We have another question from Jenny. We received an email stating that our flight dated on February 4 was canceled due to an aircraft maintenance. The airline gave us the option to rebook or refund our flight. We decided to rebook it, but still on the same day as the original flight. Prior to calling the airline, we checked if there were still flights on February 4 instead of a direct flight. It redirects to Singapore. We asked if we can avail of this flight, but after calling them every day for the past week, we weren't granted the requested booking. Is this allowed? If they cannot provide the flight on the same day, can we demand them to endorse us to another carrier? Well, absolutely. You can demand for either a refund or for them to endorse you to another airline, considering kasi tatlo yung options ninyo. So if a flight is canceled, you have the option to claim a full refund plus damages if applicable, meaning if it were a business trip and you sustained damages because your trip was canceled, you can also claim damages. But without even having to go to court, your recourses are: one, get refund; second, get a rebooking, which you tried to do; and get endorsed to another airline if they cannot get you a rebooking at the date and the time that you want, which is, it seems like this is the case.
This is
no?
the case, yeah.
So,
Those are the three, I guess, remedies that you have. Of course, a little tip here: if you have a claim and it's less than 100,000 pesos, you might want to go to the small claims court. No, you can do that, and it's quicker and it's faster. If you feel that you were damaged beyond, let's say, for example, if you were damaged because you didn't get to go to a meeting, an important meeting, mga ganun, no? So you can.
And
It's
another
an option.
helpful tip: if they are not responsive to you, the airline is not cooperative, you can report them to the CAB or Civil Aeronautics Board. You can even email your complaint to them because they can at least intervene to make sure that your needs and your rights are observed.
Yeah. All right. All right, let's move on to the comments we have received from Twitter. User @IamSuperlay wrote, "I am a nurse, but I enjoyed the conversation of your episode on separation of church and state." Oh,
Thank
cool.
you
Thank you
at
very much.
I Am
Right.
Super Lay. And from June Rick, Legal HD is a very interesting TV show. I'm always tuned in on every episode, hoping it will extend its airing time to accommodate more questions and have broader scope of the topics. Thank you and more power to your show. Thank you so much,
Thank
Jim
you.
Rick.
Thank you for all
Very
the positive comments.
encouraging
Yes,
tips.
indeed. So that's all the time that we have for tonight. We'd like to thank our viewers who continue sending us legal questions and comments via social media. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have any questions about our topic for tonight, you may post these on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night.